Okay, moving right along on the topic of the best ways to play Elden Ring, and frankly, number 3, number 2, and number 1 are all interchangeable. They're all my favorite ways to play. Number 3 is DPS, or damage per second. That's focusing on weapons or skills that allow you to do a ton of damage very quickly and usually proc the multi-hit talisman. So the first up is the Steel Dagger, which I like for a lot of reasons. Most of all, well, second of all, is because it's so quick. The light heavy attack, so when you just tap R2 or right trigger, it does this really quick double sweeping attack. So you get 2 hits. You can do it a bunch of times in a row, like against Radagon here. You like just kind of melting him. The other thing that I like is it's a faith-based dagger, and for some reason, I don't know if it's a glitch or not, but when you put it in Sacred or Flame Art infusions, the faiths, the physical damage and the fire or holy damage scales with the faith stat. So when you have a ton of faith, the Steel Dagger just gets insane damage. And you're seeing me shred Radagon here, so love the Steel Dagger for that. It's also in the previous video using Sacred Blade against Gaius. It's a really slept on weapon, I think. I really love it. Next up is Spinning Strikes. I pretty much exclusively use Spinning Strikes on the Grave Scythe just because I freaking love the way it looks. But it works with any halberd. The Knight Rider Glaive, it's also very good on. So once I get behind Moog here, I start winding it up, and then it just takes him out. It does a lot of damage. I like it more than Spinning Weapon because you can just hold it continuously, whereas Spinning Weapon stops after a couple of hits, so that's pretty annoying. But Spinning Strikes is really cool and fun when it works. I think a little bit easier to use, a little bit better, is Wild Strikes because the hitboxes on it are just right in front of you, and you know, once I finally get a hit in on Makar, you'll see he's an annoying boss. He kind of runs away a lot, but the trajectory of it is just kind of swinging at an X in front of you, so you hit whatever's in front of you. It's a lot easier to get hits, whereas Spinning Strikes, for small enemies or an enemy that you're like a dragon or something, you're not necessarily always going to hit it because it's really just like a helicopter above your head. So here, once you start winding up Wild Strikes, you just hold it. And my favorite way to use Wild Strikes is on the Rusted Anchor because it does piercing damage, and you can use the Spear Talisman to get counterattack damage, and it just shreds everything. Not everything, but most things. It's a very fun way to just like trivialize bosses. Next up is Catch Flame. Maybe kind of an unconventional choice, but it's a quick cast and extremely strong. It's the starting incantation in the game for the Prophet class, and it can carry you through the entire game. It's that good, it's that quick, does that much damage. So I have no bad words to say about Catch Flame. I think it's one of the best incantations in the game. Here I am against an avatar, which is, they are weak to fire, but look at that. Like, I get one opening, and I probably could have taken out his entire health bar, but I wanted to kind of try Burn O Flame. So Catch Flame, use the Radagon icon or the Beloved Stardust to boost your casting speed. Honestly, probably my favorite like single weapon DPS option is the Mariah's Executioner Sword. It's a strength arcane option. It can actually honestly be a little bit harder to use. Like, as you'll see, like I didn't hit even nearly all of the like potential, but if every single hit lands, like against Gideon or somebody who stands still, it does an insane amount of damage. And by the way, I didn't mention, but the reason that DPS is such a good way to play the game, or like consecutive hits is such a good way to play the game, is it's so buffable. You have several talismans that buff consecutive hits in Millicent's prosthesis and the Rotten Ring Sword Insignia. You have the Thorny Crack tier to put in your physic that boosts consecutive hits. You can use the Godskin Swaddling Cloth that heals you on consecutive hits. So it's just a really fun way to play the game. And the Mariah's Executioner Sword is also buffable in that it does magic damage. So usually in my tier I will have, or in my physic I will have the magic tier and the consecutive hit tier. And so the skill, does magic damage. All the regular hits do magic damage. So it's extra buffable that way too. And it's also chargeable. So the Godfrey icon, if you can get a fully charged right here, hit, the Fire Giant's left leg has a ton of resistances, so it doesn't look like that high of damage. But I think on his foot earlier, I did like 14,000 damage in one fully charged use of the Ash of War. Obviously boostable by Shard of Alexander too. Just one of the best boosts in the game, 15%. So this weapon is just so freaking fun. It is frankly hard to pull off, but this is my subjective list. This is number 3. Like, yeah, Catch Flame is better. Like, yeah, some of the other options are, more user friendly, but this weapon is just so fucking cool in my opinion, that it's really high up for me. I love using this weapon in almost any circumstance I can. Number 2, and this is honestly, I know that I just said this is my subjective list, but this one is in here not even because it's my favorite way to play, but just because it would be impossible not to include a dual curved sword jump option. It is so good. It's insane how strong it is. It's very buffable with all the consecutive attack buffs plus the jump attack buffs. So I am wearing the DLC jump attack boosting armor here, which I think looks a little bit better than the base game Raptor's Black Feathers. And then there is the Claw Talisman. So anyway, my second favorite way to do jump attacks is with Bandit Curved Swords and using Flaming Strike. This is on my Faith build. You buff up both weapons, so you have 2 flaming curved swords and they do fire damage. But, you know, frankly, the just objectively better way is with Bleed, particularly on New Game +7, because Bleed does percentage-based damage. And so once you actually, like, do enough bleed to make the opponent, or make the boss bleed, it does an insane amount of damage. And this is number 1 in terms of like damage, just not my favorite way to play because it is like kind of boring. You just kind of jump. This is better than Flaming Strike in my opinion, because while you can boost fire, you can boost bleed even more. You can wear the white mask and you can use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation in addition to the jump attack buffs and in addition to the consecutive attack buffs. So this is just an insane way to play the game. See, we got Malekith to bleed there. So I use the Beastman Curved Swords on my Arcane character, Griffith. Very fun. Bandit Curved Swords would be great. Scavenger Curved Swords would be great. And just to show you how broken this shit is, here I am against the Draconic Tree Sentinel. I think it takes 4 jumps. Like, don't even have to try. But maybe controversial pick for number 1. I just love Carrion Slicer. It's kind of like the intelligence version of Catch Flame, but I think magic damage is a little bit more versatile than fire damage, because other than Renala, like nobody is that resistant to it, so it's a little bit more consistent, and it's just really quick. So the second best way to play the game, in my opinion, is to build around charged heavy attacks. They're not quite as buffable as like consecutive hits. Like there's not as many talismans or physic tiers, that you can't stack as many buffs basically. But I just, one, think it's a more fun way to play the game. It's like really cool to just like smash guys with big weapons, and it does a lot more stance damage, so you can rely on stance breaks, which are so huge in this game. And they are a little tough to get in New Game +7, but you do still get them, and the only way you're going to get them is with a charged heavy attack build. So, you know, I always have the Axe Talisman equipped. I always have the charged attack tier in my physic, and you know, you get like several thousand damage every time you can get off a charged heavy. So the first one here on this list, I'm finally getting to it, is the Mesmer Soldier's Spear, and this has not a unique, but I think like there's only like 2 weapons that do it. Charged heavy, where it does a double hit like that, and both of the hits get the buff of whatever weapon, or of the, you know, the charged attack buffs. So if you're using Royal Knight's Resolve 2, here I'm using Cragblade because this boss fight doesn't really give you much time to buff with Royal Knight's Resolve, but with Royal Knight's Resolve, you get 2 hits that have the plus 80% buff from Royal Knight's Resolve. Both of the hits get buffed by the charge attack tier and the talisman. So just a really great weapon. You obviously, it's a spear, so you get to use the spear talisman and get the counter attack boost. So really awesome weapon. DLC, very strong. I had it in Blood Affinity there. Cannot make a charged heavy attack list without mentioning the Starfists. They are probably the best weapon in the game if you're really good at the game, and that's why they're only number 3 rather than number 1 on this list, because I just like some other options more. The big downside, really the only downside of the Starfists, is their range. Like you can, they whiff a lot for like no discernible reason. But I also love a ton of things about them. They do so much damage. They do a lot of stance damage. I just got a poise break there on Midra. They do bleed. They're buffable. Honestly, I thought about putting these in the DPS category as well, because they hit so quickly. And if you do like a charged heavy followed by like a tap R1, you're doing 3 hits, and so you're using all the consecutive hit buffs too. So they're very buffable. They just have ridiculous base damage. They're so strong, and that's made up for in the range. Like you have to really know the boss moves to be able to hit them, and you have to know the punish windows. But once you do, you can smash everything because they, like right there, that's a classic Starfist whiff. But you can smash everything because they're so powerful, so quick to come out with charged heavy attacks, frequent stance breaks, and the bleed. It's like you couldn't. The only way this could be better is if it had better range. It's really a good weapon, and I'm actually, funnily enough, showcasing. This isn't even the Starfists at their best. This is on an intelligence build, and they're in the magic affinity. So it's like, this is not what the Starfists are best at, but I wanted to show this video just to show how good they are. Obviously, the best option is like in a heavy affinity or quality affinity, if you have a lot of, a higher level build. They're also really fun in cold. I could have done cold, but I did magic instead for more damage rather than relying on frostbite. So yeah, it takes some getting used to, but they're an excellent weapon. And I almost always buff them with Cragblade because, Royal Knight's Resolve is really good, obviously, but, you get so many hits out of the way with the Starfist that I think Cragblade is a little bit of a better option in most situations. And next up, we have a few options here. So the broad category here is the Colossal Poke, or really just a poke, because you could also use the Claymore, which is a great sword, not a Colossal. But I love this playstyle. I just really like the move of poking, particularly with the charged heavy, but the light heavy, just a tap R2 works as well. Right, like that's a charge, boom. I just love sticking a huge sword into the enemy. You can use the Spear Talisman if for like the counterattack piercing damage. It's like a really good damage type. It's a really good move. I just absolutely love this playstyle. So the first one this is the Infusible Zweihander. Great weapon. I have nothing bad to say about it. It's a really fun way to play the game. Another option, which honestly is like kind of even with the Zweihander, I just put it above it because there's a fun Ash of War on it, is the Ancient Meteoric Ore Greatsword, which I also had in the gap closing Ash of War. I think this is actually the same Godric fight, but this sword is, maybe if you're looking at like data points, like this sword is maybe slightly better because it has better range than the Zweihander, but it's kind of marginal because they both have such ridiculously long range. This Ash of War is fun. On the other hand, the Zweihander is buffable, so with Royal Knight Resolve, you can maybe get a little bit more damage on the Zweihander, but again, it's kind of marginal. These are both excellent weapons with that really good poking heavy move set. But my favorite of the Colossal Poke options is the Fire Knight Greatsword. It pairs really well with Flame Spear, so here I am fighting Morgott with that setup, and it's got a really good range. It has the Zweihander heavy moveset, and it also has a really quick R1 moveset, which I don't think I even use in this fight, but just good to know. When it's buffed with Flame Spear or in a fire kind of fire or flame art affinity infusion, whatever the word is, it does extra damage, kind of like the Erdsteel Dagger, and I, for that reason, put it on top of the Colossal Poke options. I find myself in my Faith build tending toward using this on NG+7 more than anything else, frankly. I think this is easily one of my favorite weapons in the game, one of the best ways to play the game. And you have a ranged Ash of War option in Flame Spear that pairs really well with Fire Knight Greatsword. So hard to beat it. All right, next up is going to be Bloodfiend's Arm is simply the best charged heavy option, and there are a lot of ways to utilize it. It does pair well with an Arcane build, but you can use it with a Faith build. You just need to hit the Arcane minimum. You can use it basically with any build. It's so good. And the reason why is the charged heavy comes out pretty quick, not as fast as a Starfist, but faster than most other weapons. And it just does insane damage, and it does insane bleed buildup. And when you hit the ground, you'll see it has this little blood spatter that does a little extra damage and a little extra bleed. And so against Loretta, which is an enemy I don't know very well, I had it in bleed affinity. Against Radagon, I have it in occult affinity because he doesn't bleed, but I still am able to basically script Radagon, which is absolutely insane on NG+7 because he has so much health. And it does so much poise damage. You get a stance break on Radagon in NG+7 after, what was that, 4 hits? Insane. Scripting Radagon in NG+7. Such a good weapon. And here it is again in bleed affinity. so it does a little bit less base damage, but once the bleed hits, obviously in NG+7, bleed is so valuable because the amount of HP that bosses have in NG+7 is just so nuts, and so the percentage base damage from bleed is amazing. Yeah, really great charged heavy option. I only have it on my arcane character, so it's, as subjective as this list is, I do feel obliged sometimes to make certain choices, and this just has to be number one because it just is better than the other options, even though I do prefer the Colossal Poke moveset. This is like, when you're tired of struggling with a boss, just pull out the Blood Fiend arm and just smash it into the ground on their face, and they die. It's like it is really fun. Like, it's not fun just because I prefer the Colossal Poke, and getting a couple bleeds on Malekith, or getting a bleed on Malekith, just ending it right away. So next up is the top way to play the game, in my opinion.